Welcome to Global Citizen Life podcast. Today on the show, we have Nicole. Thank you, Nicole, very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here and to be speaking with you.
So, Nicole, you are now in Spain. So, originally from the United States, but now in Spain. So, kind of a two-part question. One is, why did you choose Spain? And then, with all the beautiful places in Spain, why did you choose Malaga?
Okay. So, what brought me here, obviously, is my interest for Spanish culture, for Europe in general. I studied Spanish in school. I wanted to continue, and it was an awesome opportunity to travel as well. So for me, I came here, I was able to work through an educational program. It gave me a couple of years to kind of hone in on my Spanish skills, the stuff that they do not teach you in the books.
Yes. But the reality, those nuances, the little things. Yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
So, through this program, I was able to come out here. And why I specifically chose Malaga in particular, well, I'm going to give a little bit of a background of where I come from. So, again, I said I'm from the United States, I'm from the East Coast, I am from New Jersey. So, we experience all four seasons. It's true. We have summer, winter, everything, we have snow. But also, for me, I live near water. So I've always lived near water, and for me, it kind of was a connection. I came here, I loved it. I know it can't be exactly like home because I'm along the Mediterranean Sea, but for me, I felt that connection between, a little bit of water, a little bit of mountain. And obviously, the bonus here is that it's the Costa del Sol, and for the most part, it's warm all year round.
You say that a little bit like, well, there's no snow, so it doesn't get that cold, but I think maybe you've climatized a little bit. And
Yes.
so the winter starts to feel chilly, we'll say.
Yes. Yes. Right now we have a little bit of rain. We had a storm coming through, so definitely feeling a little bit of a chill, but it'll go back up this week.
Mm. Well, and sometimes it's nice to throw on a sweater for a couple of days or kind of get a break from that heat. I remember, and even still now, like living in Barcelona when I was there, and it would be hot in August is always the hottest and humid, and it would be just July, August, just super hot, and then we would get rain for a couple of days, and it would just feel so nice because it's a break from that heat. It kind of just cleans up the dust from
Yes.
being on at a beach city and kind of cleans everything up. And I said to people, the trees and flowers and everything needs water too. And it is kind of nice to just have that break for a few days, a day or a few days, whatever it might
For
be.
sure.
And then that warm weather comes back. But it's nice that it doesn't get cold for snow.
Yes. I mean, like I said, if anyone is kind of aware how it works kind of in the south of Spain, you have Granada, which is only an hour away. The snow's for Granada. For Malaga, for the most part, a little bit of rain, and then we have some sun for mostly
Right.
year round.
And that's great for people who still like skiing and
Mhm.
who enjoy the snow. It's close, and I'm sure there are people who are listening that, like me, before I moved to Spain, I didn't realize that parts of Spain got snow. I just for some reason had in my mind years ago that, Spain was warm and beautiful all the time, all year round for all of it. And I probably also didn't realize how big Spain actually is. And going from, to the north where the mountains between France and Spain are, obviously there's snow up there interior, but yeah, there is snow and there's all kinds of sports of rock climbing, cliff jumping, whitewater rafting. I mean, Spain really has all different types of weather and culture. And then when you get to the islands as well, with the volcanic beaches, black sand, it really is extremely diverse.
It's incredible. You definitely have so many options from the north to the south, and like you mentioned, the islands. I mean, anything that you think you could want to do, you can do it. Spain is
Mhm.
definitely very big, bigger than I thought too.
Yeah,
For
yeah, it is.
sure.
But the great thing too about Spain and pretty much all of Europe is how easy it is to get around. I love the train system. To go from city to city. I within Barcelona there's tons of like the buses and bicycles that you can use and just to get around, which is very different than North America because I find in North America if you take the bus, people are like, ew, you take the bus. Like, ew. And in Europe, it's kind of like, of course you take the bus. Of course you get around it because traffic, and it's just easy and it's laid out so well that a lot of times it's faster to take the bus. Or we have in Barcelona, we call it bising. It's the bicycle share thing where you can get it. You have the bicycle for 30 minutes. They have pedal bikes and electric bikes. And a lot of times that would be faster because by the time you drive somewhere and find parking and then walk to wherever you need to get, you could have just walked, taken a bike or the bus and got there sooner.
Isn't that the truth? That is
Yeah.
completely the truth. I mean, we have the bikes too here. While you, I definitely would imagine too, Madrid, Barcelona,
Hmm.
the train.
Valencia.
The
Hmm.
trains, all of that's definitely the number one means of transportation. For Malaga in particular, here, believe it or not, it's the bus. I mean, again, we have the metro system and everything as well, and we do have a train that goes around. But if you're staying local, if we're talking about Malaga capital, because Malaga is big, if you want to do large trips to pueblos, like to towns, you definitely have to take the bus or find a train. But other than that, the city is so well connected with the buses. So
Right.
that's definitely big for the capital.
Yeah. And so for people who, don't want a car or don't want for whatever reason you just don't want to drive or the budget, when you're saving a lot of money, whether it's the purchase, the insurance, the gas, the parking, it's plus plus plus. And there's also a lot of option for rentals and even short term. And I'm sure it is there too, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. So in Barcelona one time, I needed to go to IKEA. I had just moved into my apartment. I just needed some stuff and I didn't want to, IKEA stuff. I didn't want to spend a lot of money.
Mhm.
And I rented a car for, I think it was 3 hours, because I 3 or 4, I think I first thought two would be enough, but 2 hours is not long enough in IKEA. And then I just extended it a couple of times by the hour. And so you can rent cars basically kind of by the hour, by the day, and then obviously longer term at some of those bigger car rental companies. But there's a lot of, I don't want to say it's private, but it's more like people's private cars that they do put
Wow.
on a platform online where, of course, I had to load up my identification, my driver's license, things like that. And and then you can rent a car for just a few hours if you need.
That's incredible. To my personal experience, I have never rented a car in that way before.
Okay.
I'm sure it possibly exists down here in the South, but in my case, I'm more of just the public transport, or I have to ask someone to help me out. And
Yeah.
IKEA definitely is a fun time. That's a fun trip, but I can
Yeah.
imagine how expensive it could get if you're renting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what let's get into prices since we kind of mentioned IKEA and cars
Sure.
and cost of living. So everybody's kind of cost of living is a little bit different. Of course, you can spend millions of dollars in Spain on housing and everything just as the US and substantially less. So if we kind of compare your lifestyle, your cost of living, what is kind of the comparison when you were in Jersey and what you would pay compared to what you're paying now?
Okay. So for the cost of living, for example, I mean, there's definitely a couple of categories that I could think of right off the bat, right? You figure the food store, that's very big. You need to eat. A comparison can be made completely for that one. And then maybe I'll also touch a little bit on the housing and the dining. So to
Okay.
start off, for example, the food store. I'm a household of two, so for the most part, we're not buying extreme. amounts of things, but still those essentials. I think the most expensive things that you're probably going to find at the food store right now could be oil. That could be well into the $20, $30 for the big liters of oil. The eggs I had mentioned, eggs are a staple. My last trip to the US, I believe the carton of egg was close to six something. It definitely could have been well into that. Here, half the price. I think the other day I bought a carton of eggs for $2, two something.
Mhm.
So just food alone, where you could probably easily spend $200, $300 at the food store. This could include meat or without meat. Depends how you shop, right? If you shop organically or however you shop. But I would say here, for the most part, at least maybe like you said, like roughly €100, excuse me, €80 to €100. It could get a little bit more if you're looking into, purchasing meats. Since living in Spain, I've been here a little over 5 years. The amount, the euro amount that has changed. So, just very briefly, I'll explain a little bit. We're talking bags of potato chips, something super basic. Bags of potato chips have gone up at least euro.
Wow.
Again, I mentioned the eggs pretty much have stayed the same. I know oil had gone up a little bit. Obviously, your tax in
Mhm.
the food store. But yeah, definitely there's been that little bit where you could easily go into the food store maybe in 2000, I'm just going to give a year, 2021, 2022. You could probably get away with a household of two spending 60, maybe 50, $60 just on, staple things, a couple things of meat, fish. Now you're way closer to the 100, in my opinion. So hopefully that.
Well, it is everywhere how it's gone up. And I'm sure people even listening or watching think of when you go back to that kind of 2021, 22 mark, what they were spending on groceries compared to what they are now. And there was a guy on, I'm going to say Facebook. I mean, it probably was shared across all social media channels. But he bought a bunch of groceries from Walmart, and I guess on the app it remembers all the stuff that you buy. And so I get discovered it or whatever, and was going back, and he went back a few years. I don't recall exactly what it was, but he went back a few years. It was like, oh, it had all these things that he bought. And so he went to, because you could repurchase. And so he did, like, I guess you click a button to repurchase. And I think it was more than double. Like the price was, I'll just say $100 just because I don't know exactly what it was. But if it was $100, it was over like $200 for what it was now. But I mean, it was, if the price was what he bought was more than that. But he was shocked of saying even at Walmart, the price of his groceries of what he bought a long time ago, few years, had more than doubled. So if people are listening and they know the amounts, they can throw that in the comments below to remind me or to correct me. But it was a substantial difference anyway.
Sure. And
Um,
I do believe, though, I mean, if we are comparing again the US to Spain, Spain is one of the lower cost countries, I think, in general, even in Europe. I'm sure there's other countries as well that are on the lower bracket, but
think
you
when we
definitely.
move more to the eastern countries and the Balkans, I have a place in Montenegro, but even that, I had a friend stay at my place a while ago, and even she was saying, "Wow, there are things that are more expensive, and there are things that are cheaper." And she's like, "This doesn't make any sense to me." And I said, "Well, when you explain it that way too, like you're right, it doesn't. Like a salad in the that has cheese because she's vegetarian, so a salad that she would buy in a restaurant was cheaper than her buying just the cheese in the grocery store." I'm like,
Wow.
I can't explain it, but
It's life experiences.
it is. It
And just
it, it
trying your best to
definitely is.
share with the public what you can.
And and you never know. I said maybe, if they buy a lot, they're buying bulk, they probably as a restaurant, they get a better deal than
Mm.
just the portion in the grocery store. But restaurants can be interesting too for prices and dining out and cost, especially compared to the US and
Yeah.
Spain.
I feel like dining honestly is a bit cheaper. Well, yes, it 100% is cheaper here, but I think in general, for the most part, it's pretty much stayed stable.
Mhm.
Now, if we're talking about the center, I'm going to use Malaga because this is the best example I can give. So
Right.
we're talking the center of Malaga. Of course, Malaga's become an international hub. Things have gone up. The restaurants, of course, you're going to find more touristy spots a little bit more expensive.
Mhm.
But regardless, it's still pretty decent. I mean, we're talking mojitos, €7. If you're into mojitos, if you have a night out in the town, opposed to the US, 100% that's going to be $14 minimum if it hasn't changed. It's been a bit
Well,
stepping back.
it may have changed because I know even if you go to a touristy area in Barcelona, a mojito, you're probably looking at about €12,
Oh my
maybe
goodness.
even a little bit more. And recently, well, at time of recording, I am still in the US and I paid for a 9 ounce glass of wine. So a bit larger than what we would get in Spain. I don't think they generally do 9 ounces, but still, for a 9 ounce glass of wine, and it wasn't even the best wine that I had, plus tax, plus tip, cost me $30. So a €7 mojito is a great deal.
Wow. Yeah, a $7 mojito doesn't sound so bad.
It does not sound so bad at all.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. And we're talking for wine, imagine.
And I mean, and wine, and I mean, part of it is, I mean, well, in the States, there's lots of wine produced here as well, but in Spain, we've got, I wrote an article on it years ago, and I don't know, like I don't want to say a number because I'll probably get it wrong now. But there's a lot of wine regions
Mm,
in Spain for all kinds of different wines. So to spend in the grocery store or shop or something, there's so many good wines that you can get for around €7 to €10.
yes.
Like so many, it's almost an overwhelming amount.
Definitely the prices of the wines, the prices of even of the alcohol, if you're into mixed drinks, if you're into, maybe that type of cubata, those types of drinks. For sure, you're in the sevens, tens, 12. I mean, that's fantastic, opposed to one glass of wine that. And it's a little bit different too because you have to think tips. That's something that I wanted to mention, right?
Hmm.
So when you're talking about tips in the US, it's a little bit more custom to tip off of the food price, off of the bill. Whereas
Hmm.
in Spain, it's going to be a lot less for you because although it is nice to give something, you can give €1, €2. If you're feeling, very generous, five. But that's not something that you have to worry about when you're dining out.
Yeah, I usually when I think about it in Europe is to round up to the nearest kind of what, like, and not necessarily just the nearest dollar, but the nearest like 3, 5, 10, like whatever,
Mhm.
depending upon what the bill is. So I'm not carrying around a bunch of change and coins and things like that. So yeah, and it depends on service. That's one thing that bothers me is the tipping culture in North America as a whole. And I mean, where it really kind of irks me, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, is getting my nails done or my hair done. Why do I have to tip on top of that? Like made you've you've made your prices. You've said this is what it is. And I've never understood um why a person is like, well, this is my price, but I also expect 20 to 30% more. It's like, well, then why don't you just say this is my price and kind of leave it at that? But I get it's a different culture. And I understand with the serving and things like that. I used to be a waitress. So I understand. But at the same point, if you're not good at your job, I shouldn't be expected to tip or, like sometimes okay, here's a story. So I am going off on a tangent. I apologize.
Let's do
But
it.
I was in a shop. So there was a homeless guy who wanted some stuff and he's like, can I have some money? And I said, well, how about I'll buy you some stuff. What do you need? Because I didn't have cash. I only had my card. And so we went inside and he got he would just grab like a pop and a bag of chips or something. I'm like, do you want anything else? Like have take two, have like get a couple of things. So he picked up a few other things. Um, and then I went to pay and I'm like, what's and she's like, oh, it's a tip. And I said, a tip for what? She's like, well, a tip. And I said, but you didn't do anything. You're just standing here and all you did was scan the thing. She's like, well, we don't get paid very much. I'm like, well, that's not my problem. Like you didn't cook the food. You didn't even pull it off the shelf for me. Like sorry, you didn't do anything. And I was like, well,
Yeah.
that's absurd.
It
So
definitely,
it's
it's such a culture. It's a culture. It's definitely another culture shock when you do travel to the US, for example.
yeah. So and that I was like, that's not right. Serving and things like that, absolutely. I can see it, but there's certain things. So that is something that I love when I go back. And it always gets me because I'll be back in Europe and you just pay. And then whenever I go back to Canada to visit family, I try to just and I'm like, why isn't it working? Oh, right. I have to tip.
There's being someone that, lives abroad, lives in so many places. There's so many things that you have to remember each time you go to the
Right.
certain place. We have
Mhm.
files in our minds constantly sifting through.
That's yeah. And so even if people are looking at the cost of things, if even if something is the exact same,
Mhm.
and Spain is cheaper though, but even just taking out that tip, that's 20 to 30% depending, 10% depending upon, your average tip. Some things are 10, some are 30. But if you just say an average of 20%, everything is then at least on average 20% less if you take out that tipping portion. And then plus, of course, most things are cheaper anyway, unless you get into some imports and things like that, then it might be a little bit more, but
You had mentioned the services very quickly. That's something that
mm,
we get asked a lot in the group chats, especially, for young girls, there's a lot of chats. It's
yeah.
WhatsApp groups. That's Europe, that's Spain. If you're in a WhatsApp group, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, absolutely. You can't be in Europe if you don't have WhatsApp. Like that's
Effectively.
our communication is WhatsApp.
Yes. So again, with the services, it's pretty interesting because that was one of the first questions that I kind of had. So I was getting my hair done and I'm like, okay, the tipping situation, my culture is to tip for everything,
Everything.
everything and anything that you can think of. So coming here, you get a couple you reach out in some of these groups and some people are going to tell you, oh, you don't have to leave anything, it's included in the service. Others, if you want to throw a couple of euros. So that puts you also too in like, okay, what do I do? I feel cheap. I'm overspending. It definitely, you need to find it. But here as well, you typically don't tip for services.
Right. And it's one of those things too where I think it's a bit of a balance because you don't want to change the culture. And at the same point, it can be looked upon as two different ways. Some people can be like, oh, that's great. I got extra money. And then there's starting to become an expectation of it. And then there's the opposite that people are insulted by it.
Mm.
Oh, what? You think I need more money? You don't think I have enough? Like what? Like it becomes, it's like, oh, you have so much, you can just give it like I need it. Like, so it's a balance. And I think it is important to know what is the culture. And as we've said, it's a few dollars, maybe like, not too much, because one, it's going to potentially change the culture, which then if you make Spain wages, you don't want to have to be paying more because the wages in Spain are not high. Therefore, that's why a lot of the prices are not high. And by tipping, then it becomes expected. And then the local people are struggling more because
Yeah.
then they become expected to do it. Or the opposite, then you become insulting to people. And then they're not liking the expats, immigrants, tourists, whatever label category you want to call yourself, because it's, oh, they come in, they have so much money, and they get offended by it.
Absolutely nailed it. That is 100% true. You have to find the balance. You
Mm.
really do.
So what have you found? have been some of the challenges about either moving to or living in Spain? Well, it can
Okay,
be Spain in general or specific to Malaga, either.
sure. Let's get a little bit general now. So
Hmm.
I think one of the most important things that you do have to consider about moving abroad, especially particularly in my case, is bureaucracy. We have a lot of paperwork that we have to get down to business.
Yep.
So for this,
And you're right, that's anywhere. It's anywhere you move, there's bureaucracy, dealing with the government, tons of paperwork. Have patience. Just
it
have
is,
patience.
it's patience. It will all work out. Definitely try to, my consejo, um, my brain is so Spanish English. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So my word of advice, like patience, because it's a lot of
Mm,
bureaucracy, it's a lot of paperwork, but you need it. And once you have it, you're secure, you're okay. You know that, nothing is gonna happen. Your ducks are in a row. Your things are in order. It's big, it's important.
mm. And then you kind of forget about it after time. Like you remember, it's like, yeah, it was a pain, but it's forgotten. I've recently equated it one time to childbirth, which is completely, and I don't know why it popped in my head, but it did. And it was like, and I just said it's because it's such a pain in the butt and it is stressful for a bit and it is frustrating. And you think like, obviously childbirth is very painful for that moment, but then after you have a child, like we know it was, but we kind of forget about it, right? Like we don't, we're like, yeah, okay, it really hurts, it's painful, but the after is worth it. We have a kid and the years go by and then people do it again and some do it several more times, right? And so it's one of those things, not like it's that painful, but people could say, if you do sports and you break an arm, you break a leg, you continue to still do the sport because there's just that moment of that injury, that pain, that whatever. Again, it's not physical pain to go through it, but you continue to do it. So it's one of those things that yes, it's a pain. Yes, it can be somewhat stressful, but having patience and just know it's all going to work out. The results in the end, you kind of forget about how stressful you may have gotten or frustrated or anything, and you just remember, yeah, it was a pain, yeah, it was stressful, but hey, I'm here now, and so it's worth it. And that bit of time, I'll even say 1 year, but generally it does not take 1 year. But even if it
No,
is 1 year, that 1 year of some stressful moments through the span of your life is really nothing.
it's worth it in the end.
Yeah.
You have everything together. You have to present a lot of things a lot of times. You always, especially for me, I always have my identification card. Um, you need to have it for sure.
Yeah, and once it's done, it's done. And
It's
then you have it. I mean, depending upon, what type of residency and things like that, sometimes you have to renew, but the renewal process is generally quite easy once you have it. It's just that initial, and you're right, it definitely is worth it in the end.
yes, absolutely. Especially, it depends too. I'm on the places. I know in the smaller towns, sometimes things can take a little bit longer to happen. If you're in the bigger ones, if you're in the bigger cities, Madrid, for example, I'm sure is a little bit quicker. During the only time where it was a little bit slower, again, I have to revert back to it, is COVID time. That was about
Right.
6 months, but still under a year.
Yeah. I think for me, because mine was COVID time when I was getting residency in Barcelona, and I think it was 9 months.
Okay.
I think mine was, but and I remember saying to my lawyer, I was like, but I'm over my time. I'm only allowed 90 days. And she would say, no, 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 your documents are in. So it's
Okay. They can
okay. So
push.
people to remember it's like if you're filed and you're in the system. So I said, okay, so I'm legally illegal. She's yes. And I'm like,
Isn't that,
okay.
isn't that the truth?
So I'm technically illegal because I'm over my 90 days, but I'm legal because I'm in the system. So I'm legally illegal.
I love that. Very
Yeah.
good. Yes.
Yeah. But then I couldn't leave. She said then if I needed to, I would have to go to the police station and get documents and things like that. So she said you just have to stay until. So just for people to realize too, it's you have your 90 days. So if you are moving, Sometimes you apply outside of Spain, sometimes it's in Spain, depending upon which you want. But you want to do that right away because if it goes over that 90 days, it's fine, you're in the
Mhm.
system, but then you can't leave. Like you need to stay there until it's done. So you want to plan that you will be there for, even if you plan for a year and just say, you know what, I'm going to be here for the full year and stay within the country. I mean, there's beautiful places to see and visit.
Sure.
And it won't take that long, but it's just better to kind of plan it that way.
Especially for flying purposes, because once maybe leaving to go home to your to your native country, so for example, Canada or US, they're gonna allow you in. That's not a problem, but it's on the return, so that's
Right.
why it's so important. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Any other challenges?
Um, so we've talked a little bit about the move. I think another big challenge that maybe we don't realize so much, but it affects you a little bit as you get older is meeting friends, meeting groups of people. I always like to, put my 2 cents in about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's hear your 2 cents, and then I'll give you my 2 cents.
Sounds good. So meeting friends can be a challenge, not only because you are coming to a different country with a different language, in my case, an English speaker, a US citizen, and just dropping myself in Europe and saying, "Hi guys, I'm here. What are we speaking? What am I learning? What?"
Hmm.
So it can be challenging. If we're talking about, meeting people, groups of friends that have been friends forever, where are you finding these people? All right, you can go to the bars, you can go to local restaurants, you can try meetups. At the end of the day, I think you do end up meeting some of your core people, definitely at work, especially if we're talking about I'm meeting fellow Spaniards because I'm talking Spanish, I'm in the language, I'm day to day with them. You get a little bit more of that kind of meetup at work. But if not,
Hmm.
there's definitely it ends up being a big international community that you become friends with. And I'm talking about international from everywhere. And it's challenging. You want to have friends from Spain, you want to be in the culture, you want to feel like one of them. But at the same time, you do know that you are international and it's good to have those international connections too. You want to find someone that speaks your language, that's something just super easy to talk to sometimes. Another balance.
And that understands the challenges and frustrations because if you've never moved abroad or lived abroad, you don't understand what it's like and those frustrating days and the challenges because somebody can tell you and you can say, "Oh, okay, I can acknowledge it, but I don't understand the feeling of it." And
Yes.
and I agree. If you've got kids, you'll automatically make some friends because they go to school and you'll meet other parents. Through work, you'll have that. But what about those who come as remote workers, digital nomads, things like that, then making friends?
It's those international meetups. And
Mhm.
believe it or not, a lot of Spaniards and that's another way to meet a lot of local people because there are a lot of people that are interested in keeping up with their English. And, instead of maybe taking the educational route, the classes and all of that, hey, I've got a great idea. Let me go to a meetup that's down the road from my house and, let's see. So that's another a good way for people that maybe if they're just traveling for a short period of time, for those that work from home that don't have the opportunities as a person working in a public school system or who has
Mhm.
children, etc.
I found for me when I moved to Barcelona, I went to co-working spaces,
Hmm.
and I found one that was reasonably close to my house, so I could walk there each morning. Well, I it was twice a week, so those each time I would walk twice a week. It was Tuesdays and Thursdays, and some days there was five of us, some days there was 20 of us. And it was just in the back of a restaurant or a bar, as they call it there, but it's a restaurant. 'Cause a friend of mine one time, she's like, "What are you doing at a bar? Isn't it like 10 o'clock in the morning there?" because I did a little Facebook check-in. And I'm like, yeah, well, it's a restaurant bar. It's where the co-working was. And we would, you come and go as you want because it's just co-working. But people would come in the morning and we would work. And then what I loved is we all had lunch together. So it's like lunchtime because it was the restaurant. Everybody put their stuff away. We sometimes would move the tables so we would all kind of sit on a long table if we could. Sometimes there was too many of us and we couldn't. We just put our stuff away. And then we would have lunch and talk and get to know each other. And it helped on so many levels, whether it was work related. So hey, does somebody know a designer? Hey, does somebody know a coder? Does somebody know like whatever it was that we were working on? And then also to from just a life perspective of, hey, I'm looking for this product. I used to be able to get it in wherever I'm from. Is there something like it here? Or I was told this is the thing that I need. Where do I go to find it? Because shops are different. Like when I go to a pharmacy or like a Shoppers, a
Mm.
drugstore or whatever in Canada, it's not the same. Pharmacy in Spain is a pharmacy. It's like the medical part. You can't get a lot of the things that you would get at a Shoppers Drug Mart or I guess Walgreens would be comparable.
We have
Um,
Walgreens,
yeah,
CVS.
it's not like that in Spain. You need to go sometimes to specific places. And so that co-working, and then of course we made friends and then would meet, for dinner and things like that. And as adults, when we are moving abroad, we really need to put in that effort to be making friends because there's so many expats, there's so many tourists, there's so many people immigrating into all countries that the locals, I mean, they have their friends, they have their core people. They're not going to be like, oh, you just moved here, come to my house, meet all my friends. It's not the movies. It takes time and we have to put in the effort to make the friends.
100%. It's starting again. It's like starting your life again. And for the people who do stay, who do make it their forever home, or for years, when you do find those connections, they're super important. And there are some that really do bring you in, and that's it, that you're friends for life.
Yeah.
But again, it's so important when you need to find something at the pharmacy and this person has been taking the same cough syrup their whole life and it helps them and it's perfect. And you come in and you're like, I have a cough, I need help. What do I do?
Right.
Those little things. But both
Hmm.
friends, international and Spaniard, it's an incredible relationship regardless.
And it's important because it's easy to fall into what I call the expat trap.
Yeah.
And I used to teach English online and I would, people would be moving to Canada, to the United States because they were learning English and going places. And I would warn them because I have done it myself where everything is new. It's a new culture, it's a new country, it's a new city, it's a new language. It's even things at the pharmacy, they don't have Tylenol and Advil that I can just go grab or whatever. Like everything is so new that when you meet the other expats, and in our case, English speaking, that it's easy to be like, oh, okay, I can speak English, at least they can understand. And then you realize it's been 2 years, 3 years, and all your friends are expats, and you're still only speaking English. It's such an easy trap to fall into because we think, at least what I did is, okay, well, I just for now it's easy. It's easy for now as I'm figuring everything out, and
Mhm.
then I'll work on Spanish, the other things, and years can quickly go by, and then people are like, well, how come you don't speak Spanish yet? And I've had people say that, and I look at them and I've said, when have you ever spoke to me in Spanish? They're like, well, never. And it's like, so how would I be learning if we never speak it? Because you've always practiced your English with me. And so we really have to put in again that effort because it's an easy trap to fall into because it's tough. There's challenges and sometimes just those little things that just make it easier or think, oh, thank goodness. But then that becomes the norm. And it's often said, however you start speaking to somebody new is how you will continue to speak to them forever. So if you start in English, even though they're Spanish speaking, you'll not, it's so rare for you to turn to Spanish because that's just the way you communicate.
It's what you're comfortable with from the first instance. I
Yeah.
I agree with that. It's definitely a big
So
adjustment.
Important to, because I have friends that we both know English, and even when I'm around, they'll speak to each other in Spanish. And they're like, sorry. And I'm like, and she just said, and they've said, it's not like they're not being rude. They just said we started speaking Spanish. Like she's Italian, and one she's Italian, and the other girl is from the United States. So they like, but they always speak in Spanish because they met in Spain and they just kind of started and they were learning. And they said it just seems weird. If they're talking to a group, they'll speak in English with the group. When they're conversing just to each other, it
Yeah.
immediately just reverts. And they just said it's just because that's what we do. That's
It clicked for them.
yeah,
That's definitely an interesting mix. That's an interesting combo too. Italian and
in
English.
English and they speak
Yeah,
in
from the US.
Spanish.
Very
Yeah.
good. And it's all a learning
Mhm.
experience. Fantastic
Yeah.
for them.
hmm And I find too, in most places, it's just trying. There are so many things I get wrong and I get the wrong order, but or I use my Spanglish. So it's Spanish words that I know mixed with the English word because I don't know the word in Spanish. People will laugh a little bit, but they understand what I'm generally trying to say, and that they'll correct or help. And they're
Definitely.
just it's that trying and practicing is very important.
Well, definitely like to just go off of that a little bit, the meetups,
Mm,
the jobs, the co-working spaces. Co-working has become very big and it's booming down here. And this is definitely a space that there are so many locals now. There's so much integration of local and international that this has definitely become, I think, the trending area where you can meet a lot of people.
yeah. And Malaga is a very beautiful area as well. So Nicole, I want to thank you so much for your time today. And if people want to reach out to you, is it a YouTube channel and a podcast? Or because I know you share your experiences and life in Malaga. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So my personal page, I am La Americana Abroad. And this is a travel page. You can find it on TikTok, you can find it on Instagram, all the social medias. This is where I talk about culture, life in Spain, Andalusia, trips. I've paired up now with my partner and co host, Julie, at our podcast, Living La Vida Española. And this is where we have two US girls. We have come together and we're talking to expats. We're talking to people who live abroad, not only in Spain, but most of our content is for Spain. And we just share our lives and our experiences.
Perfect. And we will put the links to that in the show notes to make it easy for people to connect with you and, check out Spain, see where you're at. I mean, there's just so much that Spain offers. So thank you very much for your time today, Nicole.
It has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.